In laboratory studies of social evaluation, researchers have repeatedly observed a subtle but measurable shift in human behavior when one individual internally categorizes another as low value in the social hierarchy. One early pattern emerged from interaction experiments in which participants were instructed to evaluate strangers during brief controlled exchanges. What surprised the researchers was not overt rejection, but something far more quiet. A measurable drop in attentional allocation, response latency, and micro-expressions of engagement once a judgment of low respect was formed. No announcement is made, no conflict occurs, yet the entire cognitive architecture of interaction reorganizes itself. The subject is still being spoken to, still present in the room, still technically included in the interaction loop, but cognitively, they have already been downgraded in priority. What changes in the brain when a human being silently removes another from the category of worth respect? This phenomenon sits at the intersection of social cognition, predictive processing, and status evaluation circuitry. In cognitive neuroscience, respect is not an emotion, it is a resource allocation decision. The brain continuously assigns social weight to others, determining how much attention, empathy, and cognitive effort they deserve. This process is heavily influenced by mechanisms described in Kahneman's dual system theory. System 1 rapidly categorizes individuals using heuristic signals, tone, posture, competence cues, social proof, while System 2 rationalizes the judgment afterward. Once a low respect classification is formed, perception itself changes. The brain does not merely think differently about the person, it begins to see them differently. By the end of this analysis, you will be able to detect when this internal downgrade has occurred in real time through subtle linguistic shifts, attentional withdrawal patterns, and microbehavioral cues that most people completely miss. No one tells you they have stopped respecting you. The brain simply stops investing in you, and everything follows from that silent withdrawal. In controlled social cognition studies, one of the earliest measurable changes after a negative evaluation is not emotional, it is attentional. Eye tracking data shows reduced fixation duration on individuals deemed low competence or low credibility. The brain operates like a priority engine. It cannot process everything equally, so it assigns tiers of relevance. Respect acts as a gating mechanism. Once someone is categorized as low respect, the brain reduces cognitive investment. It stops tracking subtle facial cues. It stops predicting their next statements with precision. It begins to coarsely encode their behavior instead of finely modeling it. This is not conscious dismissal. It is metabolic efficiency. The brain is reducing energy expenditure on a perceived low-yield social target. Detection marker, conversations feel one-sided. The other person stops asking clarifying questions. Their responses become shorter, structurally simpler, less emotionally mirrored. This is not boredom in the ordinary sense. It is cognitive devaluation in action. And once attentional investment drops, the next layer follows almost automatically. When respect decreases, language changes before behavior does. Studies in conversational analysis show that speakers unconsciously adjust linguistic complexity based on perceived competence of the listener. This is known as communicative accommodation. When someone no longer holds you in high regard, their sentences become more declarative, less exploratory. Fewer questions, more statements, reduced lexical richness. Shorter syntactic structures. The brain is no longer constructing dialogue, it is delivering information. This shift reveals a critical truth. Respect is not just social, it is grammatical. The structure of language itself encodes perceived value. You may notice they stop building on your ideas. They stop extending conversational threads. They begin to close loops quickly. This is the brain optimizing for minimal engagement with a low-priority social node. And once language flattens, emotional resonance begins to disappear. In healthy social interaction, the brain engages in emotional mirroring, subtle mimicry of tone, rhythm, and affect. This is partially mediated by mirror neuron systems and social prediction networks. When respect is present, emotional synchronization occurs naturally. When respect is withdrawn, this synchronization decays. Facial expressions become less responsive. Micro smiles are delayed or absent. Vocal tone becomes emotionally neutralized. The interaction remains functional, but it loses its reflective quality. The most accurate indicator of respect loss is not hostility. It is emotional non-reflection. This is where people misinterpret the signal. They look for anger but find neutrality. They assume nothing has changed. In reality, everything has changed. The brain has stopped simulating your emotional state with precision. And once simulation weakens, prediction collapses into assumption. Human brains are prediction machines. Every social interaction involves forecasting what the other person will say next. When respect is high, predictions are refined and continuously updated. When respect is low, prediction becomes coarse. Instead of modeling you as a complex agent, the brain assigns you to a simplified category: predictable, unreliable, or low variance. This reduces cognitive load, but increases conversational distance. You may notice interruptions increase, not out of aggression, but out of perceived predictability. The brain assumes it already knows what you will say. Being interrupted is often not a dominance display. It is a prediction error collapse. The listener believes your input adds no new informational value. This is where many people misread the situation. They interpret it as disrespectful behavior, when in fact it is the behavioral output of prior internal classification. And once prediction flattens, social hierarchy becomes silently encoded. Social neuroscience consistently shows that the brain maintains implicit hierarchies in every group setting. These hierarchies are not fixed. They are continuously updated based on perceived competence, confidence, and social reinforcement. When someone is downgraded in respect, their position in this internal hierarchy shifts downward. This affects micro behaviors: who gets interrupted, who gets deferred to, whose opinions are expanded upon by others. The brain begins reallocating authority signals elsewhere in the group. Respect is not a feeling, it is a distribution system of cognitive authority. Once this redistribution occurs, reversal becomes difficult without new evidence strong enough to override the classification. At this point, interaction no longer feels equal. It feels structurally weighted. And then something more subtle begins to emerge. By mid-interaction, a fully formed low-respect classification triggers energy conservation behaviors. People begin to invest less time, fewer words, and reduced emotional bandwidth. They check their phone more often. They mentally exit conversations earlier. Their responses become reactive rather than generative. But here is where it becomes more complex. Respect is not always removed because of incompetence or failure. Sometimes it is removed because of misalignment with expectation. A person can be intelligent, capable, even articulate, and still be downgraded in respect if they violate subtle social expectations: timing, confidence calibration, emotional congruence. The brain does not evaluate absolute worth. It evaluates predictive consistency within a social frame. This is the part most people miss. They assume respect is earned through ability alone. In reality, it is often granted through predictability within acceptable norms, which means respect can collapse even in highly competent individuals if their behavior disrupts expected social rhythm. And once that rhythm breaks, the brain shifts into conservation mode. If these mechanisms operate automatically, then respect is not as stable as people believe. It is not a moral judgment, it is a continuously updated neural efficiency model. The unsettling implication is this: most people are not evaluating your true value. They are responding to the brain's current prediction of your social utility, and this process is reciprocal. You are doing it too, constantly, without awareness, which means every interaction is shaped less by truth and more by classification speed. People do not experience each other directly. They experience each other through filtered cognitive models that update in milliseconds. And once a person is placed into a low respect category, Every future interaction is interpreted through that lens, even when contradictory evidence appears. The brain prefers stability of model over accuracy of perception. That is the real mechanism behind social stagnation, misjudgment, and invisible rejection. Not hatred, not malice, just efficiency. Now that the mechanism is visible, it becomes detectable in real time. First tool, watch for linguistic contraction. When responses shorten, flatten, or lose curiosity, respect has likely shifted downward. Second tool, observe attentional leakage. If someone repeatedly glances away, checks devices, or fails to maintain predictive engagement, their cognitive investment has dropped. Third tool, track conversational asymmetry. If you are no longer being asked to elaborate, explain, or extend ideas, you are no longer being modeled as a high-value input source. The brain reveals respect not through what it says, but through what it stops building. And once you can see this process, it becomes impossible to unsee it, because you begin to recognize that respect is not a fixed trait others give you permanently. It is a dynamic computation continuously revised in real time. And in that realization, social interaction stops being mysterious and becomes legible, not simpler, just transparent. The final insight is this: people do not lose respect in a moment. They lose it in micro-adjustments so small the conscious mind never notices, until the relationship has already shifted shape. The next layer of this exploration is not about how respect is lost, it is about how it is silently rebuilt in environments where no one is consciously trying to repair it.